Hello there. Good morning. Today, I want to talk about what happens if you're working with a new child, a young child, and you go out to the waiting room to greet your new child, 5 or 6 year old child client using play therapy and expressive arts. What happens when you go out to the waiting room and you try and begin and invite your client to come back with you to the waiting to your playroom, and your child desperately clings to their parent or starts crying or throwing a tantrum as you try to encourage them to come with you for the very first play therapy session back to the playroom. What do you do? And if you're a child therapist and you've been working with children using play therapy and expressive arts, the likelihood you've had this happen is probably pretty good. So, if you're joining me today, welcome. Post your name in the comments. I'd love to see who's here. Uh, and where you're from, what population you work with, where you work, all that good stuff. And let's get started. Today, I want to talk about what do you do if you're meeting with your client, your young client, for a play therapy session, and your client will not separate from their parent and go with you to the playroom. That I have 4 ideas that I like to share. One of them will most likely work. I share these a lot when I'm working with people in play therapy supervision. This often comes up. I've experienced it. In fact, I can remember a time uh, in a place where I worked. It was a group practice that I owned a few years ago, and I can remember being in my play therapy office working with one of my clients and hearing blood curdling screams coming from the hallway. And one of the therapists I was supervising had a brand new client who I believe was probably 4 or 5 and was absolutely terrified to go with the therapist for the very first time to the playroom. I felt so bad for everyone involved. So we had a chat about some things that the therapist could do moving forward, and they did seem to work. So that's what I want to talk about today. What are some things that you can do if you're meeting with your client for a play therapy session and you are trying to take them back to the playroom and they will not separate from their parent? They're clinging to their parent desperately, or they're screaming and yelling, acting like you are about to be an axe murderer and kill them. And the parent looks at you out of desperation, like, please know what to do. Please know how to help my child because I don't know what to do. And these are really challenging situations. They're difficult. Um, they're anxiety producing, especially if you're a new therapist to play therapy and you've not had this happen before and you're not real confident in your skills to begin with. There are some things that you can do, and they do tend to work. So if you're joining me, go ahead and post your name in the comments, where you're from. Do you work with children? What age do you work with? Where do you work? And what play therapy modality do you use, or expressive arts? So I'm Kathy Spooner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapy supervisor here in the United States. And I have been working with children, adolescents, and families for about 30 years. And I love working using play therapy and expressive arts. I would say probably over the last 13 years, I've been doing a lot more supervision and training and helping therapists learn how to use play therapy and expressive arts really effectively with their clients. So let's get started. Actually, first, full disclosure, if you've watched some of my live episodes before, you know I have a dog, Lily, and she likes to scratch the door. She'll pant. I'm about to let her in because she's scratching at the door. So if you hear weird noises in the background, the likelihood it's my crazy dog, Lily, is pretty high. Let me go let her in. Come on, Lil. All right, she's just kind of sauntering in like she owns the world. Like, Mom, what the heck? What took you so long? Hey, little Bills. Yeah, she looks exhausted. She's up early. All right, so let's get started. I want to first and foremost think about it. I think it's important to understand what's going on with the behavior, because if you understand what's going on with the behavior, then these ideas, these 4 ideas that I'm going to share with you, will make much more sense. I like to look at things from a neuroscience and attachment lens because to me, the brain is the boss of the body. I heard that said once several years ago. I love that saying. The brain is the boss of the body. So what does that mean? We all have neuroception circuits. So if you're familiar with Stephen Porges, he talks about neuroception circuits, which are the circuits that are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, never turn off. These are the circuits that will evaluate all the time for danger. We're not consciously aware of it. This is our brain keeping us alive and constantly on the alert for danger. And so if you have a child who's new and the likelihood the child coming to you has anxiety and may experience a lot of emotion dysregulation, quite possibly due to their anxiety, then we already know they're going to be anxious. And anxiety is really about assessing something bad's going to happen. So imagine your young client sitting in the waiting room with their parent in this strange office, waiting for some strange person to come out. A lot of times they think it's because they've done something bad, not even that the parents tell them that. Kids will naturally go there in many cases, I think. And so they're sitting in this strange person waiting room. They're used to going to the doctor and waiting in the doctor's office. So that already creates a little bit of a sense of safety issue or concern, because think about the doctor's office from a young child's standpoint. It usually means they're going to be poked or prodded and quite possibly get an injection. So they've never been to therapy before. They don't know this is different than the doctor's office, but they're anxious. Their neuroception circuits are engaged. They are now alert to potential danger. It doesn't necessarily mean there has to be real danger for those neuroception circuits to be engaged. They've assessed danger, and they're anxious. So if we understand that, then we understand that the key in the beginning of therapy, and quite honestly throughout therapy, is to help our clients feel comfortable, to feel safe and secure, as we say, in the free and protected space of the play therapy room. That's one of the hallmarks of pretty much every play therapy modality. And using expressive arts is creating a free and protected space. Because if we create that free and protected space, then what's going to happen to the neuroception circuits? They're going to get disengaged because they're not going to be assessing danger or threat. And the only way we can get our clients to engage is neuroception circuits have to be deactivated, and this social engagement circuits have to be engaged so they can engage their play circuitry. So that's the first and foremost, that's the task to get started in the play therapy process. So if our client is having a hard time separating, it means because they don't feel safe. So we have to figure out as therapists, how do we help our clients feel safe so they can engage in the play therapy process. And so to do that, there are 4 ideas that I want to share with you today. And If just so you know, I go live every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. here in the West Coast, Los Angeles time, uh, Las Vegas time. And I go live on LinkedIn, in my Facebook group for mental health professionals using play therapy and expressive arts. If you're interested in that group, it's called Play and Expressive Arts Therapy Playground. You can go to that Facebook group. You do have to answer the questions in order to be admitted into the group. Um, and I'll go live on YouTube. So if you find this episode helpful, please like it and share it across your social media. And let's get started with the 4 ideas. And if you're joining me, go ahead and post your name in the comments. So let's see who's here. Alrighty, so first and foremost, this is an idea that a friend of mine shared with me many years ago, and it is golden. And it is called, well, it's basically whichever parent brings the client, your little client, either mommy brings or daddy brings, or every once in a while, grandma or grandpa will bring, and you can make them be grandpa's statue. But essentially, it's mommy statue or daddy statue. And you have to explain to mommy or daddy what that means to be statue. So essentially, they're going to be a statue. They're going to be in the room with you, and they're going to pretend to be a statue. And just having the child be able to see their parent in the room will already help them to feel safe because mommy or daddy will be in the room with them. And because you want to try and establish that sense of safety and security with your client and that therapeutic rapport, you need the child to engage with you as the therapist. And that means you have to find a way for the parent to be in the room, but not engage with the child. And that's kind of also, I think of that also as a little bit like exposure therapy. We've kind of met them where their tolerance level is, parent is in the room, they feel a little bit more comfortable, and we're beginning to slowly expose them to not having the parent in the room if we've decided, done our clinical decision making, that we'd like to meet with the child and do individual play therapy. So mommy statue or daddy statue is just like it sounds. You're going to be a statue. So a statue doesn't engage, a statue doesn't talk, a statue doesn't play on their phone. A statue is just a statue. They just kind of hang out there, being quiet. They keep um, as neutral a face as possible. And so when the child goes over to engage with the parent, mommy or daddy just continues in statue mode. This works really well with child-centered play therapy, which is one of my main modalities that I use. And then as a therapist, you're tracking, oh, you want to talk with mommy or daddy. You're checking to make sure mommy and daddy or mommy is here. And mommy's being mommy statue right now. So mommy statues don't talk. And if you see, you can track the child's behavior. Like if the child tries to get their attention, oh, you would like mommy statue to talk to you. And mommy's being a statue and statues don't talk. So you can kind of track that way. Eventually they'll get used to it. I have only had one child and she was older. This child was probably, I'm trying to remember, I think she was like 10, maybe when she started coming, which separation anxiety does happen at that age. Typically, it was kind of unusual to have a child at that age that wouldn't separate, and she wouldn't, which gave a lot of good information about the level of anxiety and the level of enmeshment with parents. And parent was bringing her because she knew that her child needed to be able to separate better. So mom was working on it. And it was kind of a complicated situation. I've only had one child, a little older, who absolutely would not. I mean, we did it for a few play therapy sessions, and I meet weekly when I meet with kids. Um, and she would not do it. So some of these other ideas I'll share with you that might be helpful. I ended up using the last one that I'm going to share with you. Um, the idea is if we start out with mommy or daddy statue, or think in terms of kind of like exposure therapy where you have them in the room and then you kind of want to slowly move them outside the room. And you can do this next idea that I want to share with you, which is have mommy or daddy sit outside the door to your office, to the playroom. Have a chair out there for them, have them sit out there. Um, the likelihood you can try closing the door or you can keep it cracked. The child will probably go and check on the parent just to make sure they're still out there. Make sure mommy and daddy or mommy or daddy, whoever brings them, does not leave the chair because the child goes to check and the parent's not there. It's going to create some panic for them. So it's kind of a slow exposure to have mommy or daddy sit outside the door. Here's a thing you want to think about though. If you're not in a play therapy office by yourself and you have colleagues, you want to make sure you have sound machines on so that the parent sitting outside of your door does not overhear other people's sessions, which kind of violates HIPAA. Here in the United States, that's our privacy laws. So you want to make sure that there's a sound machine out there so you can respect the privacy of your coworkers. And you want to make sure mommy or daddy does not leave their spot until the end of the session. If you can close, and if let's say you're doing a slow exposure to moving parent out of the room because you, in your clinical decision making, you've determined you want to do the individual therapy. You can have mommy daddy statue in the office, and then part of the conversation will be, okay, mommy is going to sit in the hallway when you come next time. Um, and then when the child comes next time, you can say, remember, mommy's going to sit in the hallway. She's going to be right here. She's not going to move. If you need to leave the door cracked open a little bit, or honestly, if you need to leave it open a little bit more because they need it open a little bit more, you have to figure out where the distress tolerance, what they can tolerate. And then you start there. You're challenging a little bit and you want to make sure they can stay within that window of tolerance so that they don't dysregulate. Um, and so mommy or daddy will sit outside of the door for the entire session. You may have to do that for 1 or 2 sessions. You can slowly, if they slowly begin to move them out of the hallway, like for example, if you leave the door open for a session or 2, then you want to work towards leaving the door closed. And then you want to work towards moving. You can even try moving. I've had sometimes where we've had to have the parent like sit 4 feet away from the door, not right outside the door. So it's that slow exposure idea. Until eventually you get the parent into the waiting room. So that's idea number 2. Forgot to use my little banner there. So parents sit outside of the door. That's idea number 2. And another idea is, let's say, and you can use all of these 3, the first 3 or even the 4, as part of your slow exposure out, or any combination that seems to work best. That's part of your clinical decision making, is to figure out which of these is going to work best. So the other idea, some of you, if you've been doing play therapy for a while, you might have heard of, you might have even used the invisible string. If you've used the invisible string book, post in the comments. Let's see what your experience has been with that. So the invisible string, which I'm going to show you, you can get this wherever books are sold, like Amazon. If you don't already have it, it's a really, really cute book. And there it comes with you can also get the activity book. Comes with lots of different ideas to go along with the book, which are, they've got some good ideas in there. So essentially the invisible string is we have these invisible strings from parent to child that even though we don't see the connection, it kind of gives it's an analogy for that attachment relationship. So the invisible string is an invisible string that attaches us to our parents. So we're always safe, we're always loved, we're always valued, we're always taken care of. So that along that kind of attachment line. So one of the people that I supervised, one of the things that she did in this slow exposure, so she had mommy be mommy statue, and then mommy sat outside the door. We kept the door open, and then they read the book, um, The Invisible String, read that with mommy in the room with the child. And then what they did was they took a string that was long enough from anywhere in the playroom to mommy's chair. And that's how they were able to close the door, is that mommy had one end of the string and the child had the other, and she could tug it whenever she wanted to, and mommy would tug back to let her know she was still there. Occasionally the child would go and look out the door to make sure that was actually mommy tugging on the string. So that's another idea. And then there are other really good activities in there that you can do to kind of continue that theme of uh, the invisible string, which is really good if you have a child with separation anxiety. Um, so that's idea number 4, use the invisible string. And the activities, you can get that book anywhere. Like I got it on Amazon. It arrived in a day. It was really quick. I was surprised. And then the fourth idea is you can include parents in the session. You can use attachment based or family play therapy ideas to work on that parent-child relationship, to help strengthen the relationship, which ideally would strengthen that sense of self. If you think about the attachment relationship and that ability to use the parent for co-regulation, especially if they're young, they need their parents as their therapeutic agents of change, which if you've listened to any of my previous live episodes, you would have heard me say that maybe a bazillion times. Um, and this is something we talk a lot about in my supervision groups and the trainings that I do. This is all that clinical decision making using a theory model. I like to use attachment and neuroscience to understand the behavior. So when we're thinking about what clinical interventions we need to use if our child is not separating from their parent, and we would like to try some individual play therapy sessions, then which of these ideas do we think would be the most helpful? And it might be any combination of these ideas. If you think about it, though, what we're doing is we're helping to co-regulate by identifying what they can tolerate and then slowly challenging a little bit using parent in the process to help regulate the child so that eventually they can separate. And the client that I mentioned earlier, where I tried all my tricks, man, it was not happening. So we ended up doing some parent-child sessions. I included mom in the play therapy sessions, and we worked on some things that way. They had a lot going on in the family. There was a lot of upheaval. So it did end up making sense to include mom in the play therapy sessions because her child needed her to co-regulate. And then we worked on some of the relationship dynamics. And I met with mom individually to do some parent coaching, and then we would try them out in the session. So these, if you have a client who is not separating in order to do the play therapy, these are some really good ideas. Using any one of these 4 ideas has worked really well for me over the last almost 20 years in using play therapy, and has worked for lots of people that I've supervised, and we've talked about ways they can use these with their clients. So these actually work pretty well. I'd love to hear your comments. If you have used any of those, post your experiences in the comments. And just as a recap, if you have a new client, a new young client, and they're coming to your office and you're getting started in the play therapy process and they won't separate, and maybe they're even clinging desperately to their parent or screaming as the one child did in the hallway, the reason for that is they're scared. So that's the target that needs to be addressed, meaning you have to create that sense of safety and security, and they're telling you with their behavior loud and clear that they're not feeling safe, and for them this feels unsafe and dangerous. So you've got to figure out how to help them do that. And these are 4 really good ideas to help them feel safe and secure so that they can engage. So the first one is mommy statue or daddy statue, in which mommy or daddy is in the session and they are statue. They do not interact. They don't engage, because you don't want that dynamic to get started if you've determined you need to do the individual sessions. And from mommy or daddy statue, maybe that's all they need, and mommy or daddy can go sit in the waiting room 1 or 2 sessions after that. Maybe you need to do a slower exposure process, in which the next step is you have mommy or daddy sit outside the door. You may crack the door, you may not crack the door, you may have to leave the door wide open. If you use this option, the child will probably go check just to make sure mommy or daddy is out there. Make sure mommy or daddy know they cannot leave, because if their child goes to check on them and mommy or daddy is not in their chair, the child is going to get distressed. And then you've just kind of created a trust problem that's going to take a little longer to solve. So another idea is, and this might be something you do after you've had mommy or daddy sit outside the door. You can, or early on, you can use it for the first session as well, is to use this book, The Invisible String. It's nice to be able to give a concrete kind of metaphor to use to help kids understand that they're always connected to their parent. Their parent is always there. Parent always loves them. And then there's a book that goes along with that for activities, so you can use that and add it into your exposure process, or you can use it from the first session. And then finally, you may want to think about, does it make more clinical sense to address the problems at hand if you integrate parents as the therapeutic agents of change much more into the therapy process? So even with the other 3 ideas, you're still using parent as therapeutic agent of change in order to help that exposure process and help that child separate. If you've determined, though, you need to integrate the parent more into the treatment process, you can think about which attachment-based play therapy model you want to use, or maybe you want to use a family play therapy model. Maybe you want mommy and daddy both in there, or maybe the child lives with a grandparent, or they're not with their biological parent, and you may want to integrate whoever their guardian is. You may want to integrate siblings. Those are the things you may want to think about. What are the clinical issues that need to be addressed, and what's the most effective way to do that? And sometimes integrating parents into the play therapy process much more in the sessions with their child is is going to be a more effective way to help make the changes that need to be made and address the reasons that they're coming to the play therapy process. All righty, so that is it for today. Again, if you found this information helpful, please like and share it across your social medias. Um, and if you are watching from my YouTube channel, please feel free to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll be notified when I'm going live. If you're interested, um, I have a PDF. It's called the B5 framework that uses a neuroscience and attachment informed lens, so to speak, in order to kind of conceptualize how to create that sense of safety and security, that therapeutic rapport, using intention in the process to create and maintain therapeutic rapport and your clinical decision making process. So if you're interested in that, I will post a link in the comments below a little bit later. After this ends, it's called the B5 framework. I'll post a link in the comments. If you would like to click on the link, you can access that. If you can also access it from my website, which I have scrolling along the bottom here, rrhcounseling.com. It'll be on the first page. You can click on the link there if you're interested in getting it that way, or I will post it in the comments below. All right, so I'll be going live next week. I've been doing a kind of a series on structuring the play therapy sessions. Last week I talked about what are some of those key things that need to be included, or key things you need to think about to create a safe therapeutic space. I've talked about structuring, frequency, and so really getting started thinking about structuring the sessions. Next week, I'm going to talk about what happens if your client won't leave your playroom. That one I've had happen a lot more than I've had clients who won't come to the playroom. So I'll be talking about that next week, and I will see you then. Bye.